All right, hello and welcome in, everybody. Today we are in for an exciting episode of the Titans of Fantasy Football podcast. I am your host, Garrett Daigle. With me, as always, Caleb Armstrong.
Yo.
Today is the fifth episode of our second season here, and we're going to be going over quarterback tiers. So, tier-based drafting. Caleb, right away, you want to give us an overview of what tier-based drafting is and kind of what that means?
Yeah, so tier-based drafting. So going into drafts, you especially with I guess with like the rankings of rounds and where guys should go, you kind of select these tiers of guys who kind of high place finishes all the way down to starter level down to guys you really don't want. So we're gonna kind of give a breakdown of our tiers where we see the separation between your top dogs, your almost there guys, your elite guys, and then your starters and stuff. So we're gonna kind of break it down for you for guys we think fall in certain tiers, you can say, on where they're probably gonna, not probably gonna place, I should say, but where we think they're gonna place and where they're getting drafted around for rounds and stuff like that too. So yeah, so tiers. I mean, we'll talk about tiers obviously the next couple episodes here as we're breaking down by position. But I'll just I guess we'll get into it more when we start covering. But how we kind of view these tiers for these rounds.
Yeah, and I think my favorite analogy for how tiers and the comparison can work is say you were drafting at the 3 spot, and the draft comes back around to you. You get ready to make your second round pick or your fifth round pick. Let's say your fifth. So you get ready to take your pick, and you have the last of your running backs from tier 3, and you have about 4 or 5 wide receivers from tier 3 left. If you were to pick one of your wide receivers first, then most likely there's a good chance that your last running back from that tier is gone. Whereas if you were to go the opposite way around, take the running back first, you have a better chance of getting more or one of those guys from tier 3 from your wide receiver group to come back around. So the idea is just that you're kind of looking at these groups of players and saying, hey, these guys all fall within a rank or within a group within themselves that kind of sometimes there's a hard, fast line where you say, hey, I like 4 of these wide receivers right off the top of the gate. And then after that, there's a huge line, whereas sometimes the water is a little bit more muddied. And I think with quarterbacks, we definitely have a couple hard, fast lines and a few that are a little bit more muddied. So, going to be kind of an exciting one to start us off here to begin with. So, yeah, without ado, Caleb, lead us into the quarterback tiers that we have today.
All right. So I have 6 tiers. Garrett has 5 tiers. And so kind of the way we view these tiers as is our tier 1 is guys who likely will finish, have a good chance of finishing the top 3, but probably won't finish in the top 7 besides maybe an injury or something like that causing
won't fall out of the top 7, right?
Yeah. So likely a top finishing quarterback. Like I said, one of these guys is probably likely going to be the QB1. And so that's where we've had this top tier. Tier 2 is guys outside looking in. Right there, just a little bit below where we rank these guys at. Like I say, outside looking in into the top 3 finish. One of them could sneak in, 2 of them could sneak in, depending on how many we have in this tier. And then tier 3 is top 5 potential to top 3. So guys who maybe have shown something, maybe have a new position or a new offensive style, might have new weapons, might be able to take that step that we talked about this play. Tier 4 is your weekly solid starter. So guys, probably that QB 8 to QB 15 range, you guys in that range, for finishing wise. Tier 5 is questionable starters, potentially a week fill in, and then my tier 6 is my guys that I say proceed with caution, question marks following them, but could potentially be starters. So
And
with
for just to be concise today, we only ranked the top 24 quarterbacks. There
yeah.
are several others that are a little bit more notable that might fall out of that, but just so that we're not rambling on and going through the whole gauntlet, that's the furthest we went, which is still more than plenty for most 12-team home leagues that are out there.
Yeah. So funny thing is here, our tier one is the only thing that is even relatively close to the same, and just some rankings different. So Garrett, let's just name off our the three guys in tier one. Our order is a little bit different for where we rank them, but all still in that top tier. So I have Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts.
Yep,
Uh,
and for me, I have Hurts, then Allen, then Mahomes. I think you look at any league out there from last year, and these three guys were at the top. It really was one of those things where they were head and shoulders above the competition. You look at fantasy points per game, and these guys were all 25.6, 25.2, 24.3. The next closest was Joe Burrow down at 21.7. So these three were getting you, on average, 3 or 4 more fantasy points per game than the next quarterback out there. And
mhm.
that's a huge positional advantage. It was just kind of an anomaly of a year to see the top just so far head and shoulders above the rest. A
Yep.
big part of that is the rushing upside you get with Hurts and Allen, where these guys, are Allen pretty much has averaged 8 rushing touchdowns a year. Hurts ran in 13 last year, which is just a colossal amount. Add in 700 rushing yards from those two, and they just have such a great fantasy floor week in, week out. And then we already know with Patrick Mahomes what he has done on the football field in terms of productivity and success in terms of winning games. Last year he had over 5,000 yards and over 40 passing touchdowns to go with another 300 some yards on the ground and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he does give you a little bit on the ground as well, which that extra oomph, any little bit helps.
Yeah, so I guess the two easiest ones here and two things that we should point out. Mahomes, Allen, don't really need to. I mean, like it makes sense why they're in this tier range. Like you talked about, the average, the high points per game, and the thing with those two that we've seen so far both of them in the past 3 years have finished in the top three. Allen was 1-1-2 in the last 3 years, and Mahomes is
Mm-hmm.
2-2-1. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how that's all lined that way. But Mahomes and Allen, the thing that makes them so like up there, and like not just the fact that they score high points per week, is both of them play almost every single week. They're out there, and you can rely on these guys. These guys really haven't shown too much for injury, so like holding them back. Maybe I think like no more than 1 week they've missed. Besides like over a stretch, they've never had back-to-back weeks where they've been out. So that's been big, for that consistency. Hurts obviously flashed dramatically last year with the Eagles. Kind of had that breakout, got paid, but he's got that little bit of a running aspect to him, which we could see eventually lead to some injuries down the road. But getting into tier two, this is, like I said, where things really start to break up here for Garrett and I for rankings. Garrett has a lot more guys he views in that tier two compared to me. So, Garrett, who is your guys here in this tier two?
Yeah, so for me, I kind of view this as, we have 2 elite passers and we have 2 elite rushers.
Yeah.
All 4 of these guys can kind of jump up into that tier one sporadically. And there's a good opportunity that going into next year, one or more of these guys is with that group of Hurts, Allens, and
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes.
Yeah.
So I have Herbert, then Fields, then Burrow, then Lamar Jackson. So I feel like any of those 4 guys, they kind of stand next in line from the other guys. So of those, 2 are on your list and 2 are not. Do
Mm-hmm.
you want to elaborate why you have your guys where you do and
Yeah.
the other 2 lower?
So 4 and 5, I have Burrow and Jackson. So that's my only two in tier two. Only reason why is looking at, like you said, the points per game aspect for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Burrow and Jackson were very similar in points per game last year. Lamar kind of had a down year and still averaged 20 and a half points per game. We saw him obviously be injured, but now, I wouldn't say they went out and got a whole lot for him, but they got more than they've had in the years past for wide receivers for Lamar. And so he's finally got a room that's not filled with like 35-year-old wide receivers that, are on a decent contract where I think right now their wide receiving room, they got Odell, Flowers, Bateman is on pup, but we don't know when he'll be back to back, but he's still in that room. Andrews, and then, wide receiver 4 is Nelson Aguilar. That's not a bad wide receiver 4 to have.
Yep.
So that's usually been Lamar's like wide receiver 2. So a guy like that. So, Lamar could have a chance to, get back up into that tier 1 where we've seen him in the past before, where, he was MVP season, had that big rushing upside. And that's where, like, I just rank them there. And I think those two have a better shot than the rest for me to get into that tier 1 than the other guys where you like you said, Fields and Herbert, you put in that same category.
Yeah, and I think the reason I have the other two guys with it is Herbert got injured early on in the season,
Yeah.
and then he kind of gritted through it. The last 2 years, including his rookie season, before that, he was absolutely phenomenal. Just an elite passer, getting some work on the ground. He was kind of 95% of what Mahomes has been. So he's kind of, in my mind, he's barking on that door and just really close. And then I really liked what I saw from Fields last year in terms of the rushing game. He started out the season really slow. So it took him like 6-ish weeks, 7 weeks before he actually had a decent game. He started out the season off 14 points, 9, 6, 10, 17, 19. So he started warming up. And then after that, it was just bam, bam, bam. He was hitting with the hammer. And you were getting fantasy outings like we saw from Lamar Jackson 3 years ago when he had his MVP season. So the passing yardage certainly hasn't been there with Fields, but he gets an elite receiver in DJ Moore. I kind of view him as just a sliver ahead of Burrow and Jackson, just because of like how phenomenal his rushing was last year. He had so many breakaway runs. Jackson was great, but he also just has had a slew of injuries the last few years, and it seems like he just can't quite get right. So that scares me off a little bit. So I have him tiered a little bit lower. And then Herbert, I feel like just has provided a little bit more stats wise than what we've seen out of Burrow. So again, my tier 2 is Herbert, then Fields, then Burrow, then Jackson.
Yeah, and like getting into my tier 3 here is I'm not too far off with you there. I just separate the tiers a little bit. My tier 3, the start of them is 6 and 7. I have Herbert and Fields. So I mean, like they're right there, obviously
Yep.
for me too. I just view Burrow and Jackson just a little bit above them. And then my last one in this tier is Trevor Lawrence. I feel like that mean maybe pushing a little bit too hard on him here, but Lawrence, we saw, I think what he finished last year, finished as QB 8. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think a lot of people realize that, but like you talked about getting warm, he kind of started the year. Well, actually, the Jaguars in general started the year. I think it was like 2-6. I think it was for the first 8 weeks, and then they finished 8-3 to start. And I really want to say it was on him because at the end of the year, there, he was connecting more with Ingram, getting more involved in that offense. And we've talked about how this offense right now is just set up. I mean, it's tough fantasy wise to break down the whole entire offense besides Lawrence. Like Lawrence is the key winner this offseason. Everybody else in that offense, you're like, okay, like they've all had, like Kirk. They bring in Ridley. Ridley's still got Kirk there. Zay Jones has moved down to wide receiver 3. Ingram, they give him all that money, but they still got other guys there. And then ETN, they bring in Bigsby. So it's like, although like it's a great football offense, it's questionable like who's gonna like come out for that fantasy offense. But they're for fantasy, when you think about that, there's only one clear winner here, and that's Lawrence. And so he's already finished, like I said, in the top 10, and we saw him, win that first game against the Chargers last year in the playoffs too, where they were down by big time, and he came back and torched the Chargers defense there in the second half after I think it was throwing 3 picks in the first half. So, I think we both, well, actually, I don't want to ruin your first guy here on your tier, but
No,
we
and
both have Lawrence at 8. So,
yep, and I'm right there with him. He is, for me, it's funny because I have him in tier 3 with this next group, but really he's like just at the cusp of tier 2 for me. He's very close to barking on the door with those guys. And I can't fault you for where you have him with Herbert and Fields. Very close there. For me, I have him in a group with, so it's Lawrence, then Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, and Tua Tagovailoa. So I think that group we've either seen flashes from them in the past or last year we saw some really good stuff out of Tua. Tua scares me a little bit with some of his injury history, but he still has the weapons. That offense is it's got another opportunity to have one more year under its belt to click and really hit their stride. On a per game basis last year, Tua was doing phenomenal. He even had a game last year where he had a 6 touchdown outing. Seeing stuff like that really puts in a lot more confidence in a guy, and I think he really has the tools to succeed there. Now, I like Deshaun Watson and Prescott more. Watson has multiple seasons finishing as the QB5 or better. Here down at QB9, last year he was not great. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to make that sound any better. But he had a full season and a half off, and the entire last season, he was not able to practice with the team. So there was no warm up period. There was no getting acclimated, no getting into sync with his receivers, nothing. So now he has an opportunity to do that. He's got good talent there with Amari Cooper, some up and coming reclamation projects with Elijah Moore, where they're hoping to get something out of him. Donovan Peoples Jones had some great games. David Njoku's back. So there's good opportunity in that offense, and then Nick Chubb is going to kind of lead that rock. So I think they're going to score a decent amount. Dak Prescott, the reason I have him there, the last few seasons, he's been an elite passer out in the field, including the year that he broke his ankle bad. He was throwing at an unbelievable rate 2 years ago. And then now we have Ezekiel Elliott leaving the fold, which leaves up some more opportunity for Dak to get a few more rushing touchdowns like he had earlier in his career. Really, we haven't seen that the last few, but they've kind of the identity of the offense is changing with Elliott being moved on, and now we just have Bernard Pollard there, who really hasn't been getting the red zone work quite like we saw out of Elliott. So a lot of opportunity there for Prescott. He seems like a very safe pick at 10, and feel pretty comfortable with him in that group.
Question: What did you say Pollard's first name was?
Did I say a first name?
You said Bernard Pollard.
Tony.
Bernard Pollard. Little Giovanni Bernard and Tony Pollard mix,
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I know why you're high on Tua. I get it. I'll kind of talk a little bit why I have Tua, where I have Tua earlier or later, and Prescott. Like I said, I'm not trying to pick apart your lineup here, but I get the Watson part. I feel like I had him ranked too low. We each have him at 9, but I have him at a different tier. So yeah, Lawrence and Watson, we both have back to back the same. But Prescott, like you said, if he throws the ball like he did 2 years ago, and I get all your reasonings there for with Zeke gone, he was, what was it, like 40 some pass attempts a game. See, it was kind of like Tom Brady 2 years ago with the Bucks. Threw the ball just a pile. And like you said, without Zeke right now, Tony Pollard he can handle a workload that we kind of seen at the end of last year. But he's also way more bigger receiving threat than Zeke has been in his career. So, like you said, it could be a lot more designated design passes to the running backs, which only helps Prescott. So
not to mention or forget that Brandon Cooks is there now too, which is a very viable wide receiver too.
And finally a full Michael Gallup after a full season of ACL with an ACL, where he finished in the top 20 the year before. Or 2 years prior to that, when he didn't hurt his ACL. So there's Gallup, we've seen he could be a solid 3, and then so my tier 4. This is where things get really, really, I would say, interesting here between Garrett and I. We've had like kind of the same guys in these different tiers, but like now it just gets to the part where there is some differences in ranking. So after Watson, I should say. So 9, I have Watson as my tier 4. And like I said, tier 4 is I view as solid weekly starters, guys. 1 QB leagues for the most part, who I consider you start most weeks. So Watson, Aaron Rodgers at 10, Russell Wilson at 11, Daniel Jones at 12, Kirk Cousins at 13, Geno Smith at 14, and then Kyler Murray at 15. I will talk a little bit about that, and then Tua at 16. So Murray, I feel like okay, just a question mark surrounding him right now. Like, is he when he's going to come back? We've heard reports he could be ready by week 1. Don't know when he's going to rush back. But Murray last year was also considered a down year for Kyler Murray, and he averaged almost 19 points a game. And at the average of 19 points a game, that puts him between QB 5 and 7 on the year. So still in that like tier where like if Kyler Murray is fully healthy, I would probably have him at the top of my tier 3, peering into my top tier 2. So right in that QB 6
Yep.
range, because we like you said got that rushing upside. Yes, he lost D Hop, but we saw him be very successful last year, which is Hollywood Brown in that offense. And so right now that's who we could have, but we don't know. Arizona could be on a rebuild, so that's why I just have him here at QB 15 right now. I think he's of value, honestly, because the likelihood is he could return week 6 if he starts on the pup. So
Let
that's
me
what.
let me ask you this, Kale. So Kyler coming back at some point this season, I actually failed to add him to this list because of the uncertainty of when he will come back. If you were to draft a quarterback to pair with Murray, who'd you be targeting in terms of a guy who could get off to a good start, who could kind of hold over the fort until Murray comes back?
Prescott or Goff as
Yeah.
two of my targets, I would say. And those are in my next kind of category I'll talk about there. But you could kind of almost, like get both of these guys pretty well. Prescott probably in like the 8th, 9th round, and then Murray is kind of falling around that range too. So you could almost get, go late with the QB in the draft if that's your strategy. And, if Prescott, obviously, we've seen him play at a high QB1 level, so you could win off there. But if Murray comes, if Prescott's kind of like he did last year, wasn't that great, but was like a good filler type deal, like a weekly starter, then then you'd be okay there. But yeah, I would say somebody like that. I think if you other guys, you'd just be drafting too high. If you're going to have Murray as well, don't waste a higher pick on a quarterback like that. If you're going to grab Murray and grab one of these guys who are, I would say safer in that aspect for where they could be like a starter, but not like quite that tier 1 starting.
Mm-hmm.
So then Tua, like you have Tua a lot higher than I have. You have Tua at 11. I have him at 16. I am not all aboard the Tua train quite yet. And the main reason is you talked about those big games that he had. He kind of had 3 outlier games last year. He had a 41-point week, a 29-point week, a 24-point week, then I guess 23-point week. And then after that, it was 14, 11, 3, 15, 16, 15, 12, 18, 13. So kind of in that like range where, he had like 10 games there where it was kind of that mid-tier quarterback play, averaging around 15 points, 16 points a game, kind of like like I would say like a Dak Prescott last year, like a Derek Carr almost. But like you said, he has the ability to pop, and that offense is obviously very dynamic. So that's why I put him in this tier 4. And honestly, almost like I debated on putting him the tier below, but like you said, he's got that ability to pop, and he has an offense where the weapons around him are just tremendous. So if he doesn't have to do a whole lot with the ball to get points, that's what I'm saying. He could
Yeah.
with Waddle, Hill, the whole running backs there, and in general, all big explosive play guys, where he could throw a 4-yard slant and then take it to the house for 80 yards and get major points for him. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he doesn't. Yeah, that's the only thing that's holding me back from like Tua either going up or down. I feel like that's just a solid place I could put him right there.
Sure. So I see your tier 4. Mine, just for reference, where we're at on our list here. Yours ranges from your QB 9 to your QB 16. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a good opportunity to point out that with tier based drafting, this is saying that hey, all these guys are ranked in kind of a similar fashion for Caleb. With that many quarterbacks, that could span as long as three rounds. So instead of jumping on one of these guys in round 7, you could wait till round 10 and grab some running backs, some wide receivers, and then wait and grab one person from the lower end of this list and get him in round 10 instead. So good opportunity to point that out, just because for you that group is a lot larger. So for me, my tier 4 is, I mean, it's pretty similar in terms of range, but it's QB 12 to QB 18. I have Russell Wilson at 12. We've seen some elite seasons out of him. He had a stinker last year. Then Aaron Rodgers moving on to New York. Good opportunity there. Good weapons to kind of rebound after 2 MVP seasons, and then last year without Devontae Adams, trying to rebound with some young wide receivers. Kirk Cousins, who seems to be a steady QB2 ish guy every year, still has weapons around him. Still like in a solid offense in terms of productivity and stability. Then here comes Anthony Richardson, who is a wild card.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I know he's lower on your list. Here's another guy where we're kind of gapped on. For me, he's QB 15, but I think there's an opportunity where we see something like what we had from Justin Fields last year, where it's maybe he doesn't even start the first few 3, 4, 5, 6 games, and that brings up kind of like my gap on Kyler Murray, where maybe I should have had him on this list, but. Anyway, Richardson, say he doesn't play for the first few weeks. Justin Fields last year was an awful passer. Awful passer. It's stated numerous times that, Richardson wasn't drafted for his, absolutely great passing acumen. He has the legs. He's a special runner and he has elite size and athleticism. If he sees the field week 6 and starts running wild, he's in an offense where they brought over Shane Steichen from the Eagles as the new head coach. He's familiar with running quarterbacks. We could see him pile on the rushing touchdowns. We could see him piling the rushing yards. So that upside is pretty undeniable, but it could be a little bit that you have to wait. So I feel like that's a good spot to have him for me is at QB 15. Right after him is a guy I'd love to pair him with, in Geno Smith. So Geno, more ended up as the QB5 last year just because of he played every single game and he was kind of steady throughout the entire season. Put up 30 touchdowns. Good job, great job. This year they add more weapons for him, and didn't bring in any other quarterbacks. So QB 16 seems like underselling him for what he did last year, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like we haven't seen it the rest of his career. And then the last two guys from this tier for me is Jared Goff and Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, I'm not sold on what he did last year. I think that could be a ceiling. He only threw 15 passing touchdowns. He had good rushing totals. He had 700 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns, but I just don't know if there's anything more he can provide from what he gave you last year, and I think there is a lower floor that he could have too.
Yeah. I got DJ a little higher than you do. Like you said, the passing thing is the scariest thing for him. But like you said, with like Richardson, like one of your cases for him, Daniel Jones kind of was a effective runner last year. They did add Darren Waller to the group, kind of a big, good add there, and then a bunch of slot wide receivers.
They're getting slotty over there.
Yeah, I think they got like 5 or 6 on the roster right now. Nothing major besides Waller, honestly, for wide receivers, which that really hurt him last year, I would say, too. Like, just not having, I wouldn't even say like a bona fide number 2 on most teams, He really kind of had just like some mid-tier wide receivers. They got a bunch of them, which is easy to replace and fill in, but nothing like, like no guy who's going to get hyper-targeted 9 times a game, so, which kind of hurts DJ for that part, but going into my tier 5 here, this is, I don't know. I had a tough time putting these guys in the tier above. I could easily see him being in that tier above, but this is where I separated my tiers between Garrett. He just kind of filled it out to the end. Mine here, I have Prescott, Stafford, Goff, Carr, Young. So the first 4 guys on this list, all vets, all played, all kind of had, besides Goff, I would say, all kind of had down years. Goff actually had one of his best years, but we've only saw, I guess, one other year where he was pretty good, and ever since then has been kind of like a mid level quarterback. But the Lions have a good offense again, and he could, like I said, he was the toughest one to place at 19 here, and I could easily see him being all the way up to what was he last year? I mean, he was QB 10 last year, and I could there is a world where he's up there again. But I just couldn't do it. I think the other guys have a higher ceiling compared to Goff, and so that's the only reason why I have him here. Bryce Young is my only rookie up in this range at 21. We actually have them both pretty similar, Garrett, for ranking here. Young, very very accurate passer. Like that's what he was in college. On a good offense there. Doesn't quite have the firepower I would say he's got in Carolina, but I don't think he's going to make a lot of stupid decisions, turn over the ball a lot. I think he's going to put up no eye popping weeks, but like a pretty steady level of play out of Bryce Young. I could see being, and then probably increase a little bit as the year goes on, as most rookies do.
I just got to say the Dak Prescott slander is, unfathomable. Tier 5, the disrespect. Disrespect.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ever since he broke his leg, like I know you talked about him getting the rushing with Zeke, but ever since he broke his leg, I mean that they have really limited his touches at the goal line there, where he used to get all those sneaks.
He was QB7 the season after he broke his leg, Caleb. The disrespect. And then last year he missed a bunch of games. So
Yeah,
I can understand, injury wise too. My tier 5, I have, this rounds out the rest of my list. I know you have a couple left, but this ranges from my QB 19 to QB 24. These are all guys with upside, but there's also just kind of a stagnant floor where these guys could just be middling quarterbacks that are just okay getting you by. I have Bryce Young and CJ Stroud kind of back to back because I feel like of this group, they have the unknown question mark where you can take the shot on them and see kind of like what they give you in terms of a rookie. It's a little bit more of a question mark, but down here it's most likely your QB2, so you might want to take some chances. Then I have Derek Carr, Matt Stafford, and Ryan Tannehill, who are three passers who I think Stafford has had the best finish over the last few years. I mean, this past season he was very, very injured, so that is a huge impact. And then the season before he threw 40 touchdowns. So it's like, what are we really going to get out of him here? There's just a lot to be wary of, and he doesn't give you anything on the ground. So that really caps his upside. Tannehill at the bottom of that really he had some rushing years where he'd give you some games where he'd do okay, but then they're looking to move on from him. So it's one of those that you can start him for a little bit and maybe get something out of him, but don't expect a lot. And then Jordan Love at 24. I feel like the Packers have some good weapons around him. They have a stable offense that's been very productive throughout the years, and he gets to finally showcase what he's got. So I kind of view him similarly to Young and Stroud, but with better weapons. So we don't know exactly what he is yet, but the keys to this Packers automobile have been handed over to him, and it's his turn to drive.
yeah. Garrett, I will say that you hitting on Stafford there. Probably if you guys are like stacks, which with quarterbacks, I would say Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford might be one of the, if depending on where you're at in the rounds, might be one of the easiest stacks to get, and you could get Matt Stafford super late, where you don't have to go like that. And like you talked about how the year before he threw 40 touchdowns, he really didn't have any. Like everybody's talking about this year, he doesn't have much for weapons behind him besides Cooper Kupp. Well, that year he threw 40 touchdowns was kind of the same, deal. I
Yeah.
mean, his wide receiver 2 was Van Jefferson, and who was his wide receiver 2 again this year? Van Jefferson. Allen Robinson went to town last year, didn't really help. So a healthy Cooper Kupp, I think, a healthy Cooper Kupp, healthy Matt Stafford, you have, a pretty good stack there if that's what you like to see, and Matt Stafford could be relevant again. But like you said, the injuries, man, we just think, when's he going to retire at this rate? I mean, his back is just his back tendonitis. Last year was just a plethora of stuff that doesn't help, and then his offensive line has only gotten worse as he's been in LA. So
Yeah.
All right, my last tier here. These are like guys like Garrett talked about, like with Love, Young, and Stroud. I got two of those guys on this list, and they're my question marks. It's like they are, like you hate putting them down here kind of because they could pop off and they could have a good one. And it's Richardson, Tannehill, Love. And you guys might be thinking, why Tannehill? Why are you throwing Tannehill on this list? He doesn't throw the ball too much, blah, blah, blah. Well, Tannehill's first 2 years in Tennessee, we saw him, do well, like you talked about. And he is on his last year. He's given the ropes. So he could, we've seen guys when they're on their like contract year type deal have the like a big out season, and then they bring in D Hop. So right now, he's got two, I would say, ex alpha type build wide receivers in D Hop and Traylon Burks. Yes, we haven't seen them pass that much, and I know I hate hitting on this point because it has just burnt people badly for the past 2 years. Derrick Henry's getting older. It's like is he going to get the lion's share of all these touches? I hate saying that because it's like it just makes you look like a fool when he gets 1,600 yards on the ground again and
Yeah.
almost 200 plus some carries and like averages 20 some carries a game. But
But
it's like,
Father Time gets us all.
yes, it does, and it's like if he goes down Henry at all, their backfields right now are mainly scrap backs. Tajay Spears, Haskins was a big back. We don't think he's probably going to play this year with what happened with him, unfortunate. And then I think the other one is Dontrell Hilliard, right? I think he's still on the roster. If not, I could be wrong there. But Tajay Spears brought in. He's a smaller back who no ACLs, but is still playing.
Yeah.
So
And then they
they
have
could have to lean on Tannehill right now.
their RB4 right now is Julius Chestnut, who is a undrafted free agent,
Oh,
and
okay.
he's behind Haskins and Spears, so he's RB3, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So and then I hate to bang on Tannehill, but like you said, Richardson, we heard he from camp word you can't really take much out of camp. He's kind of struggling with accuracy issues. Maybe you see Gardner start week one, like you said, but that rushing upside is through the roof. And then Love, kind of just that uncertainty around him. But given the keys, not much for quarterback competition there at all right now in Green Bay. So
Mm-hmm.
really, it looks like it's Love's castle to rule, and he has some elite athleticism. I would say wide receivers right there. Not really like shown too much, but if they all mold together and work together, Love could be handed an offense where he's got some tools to work with. We know he's got solid running backs behind him in AJ or Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, so at least he can rely on them guys a little bit if he needs to. But just some uncertainty there. But like you said, in offense, we've seen Aaron Rodgers dominate for so long, so that's why he's down there. But that is our tiers, guys. Those are our top 24 quarterbacks. So this is basically all the way down to QB2 for those people that are in super flex leagues / want to store one of these quarterbacks on your bench. Could kind of give you the tier breaks down.
Yeah, and as long as we're on this, Caleb, give me one or two quarterbacks whose value in terms of ADP is something that you think is kind of standing out right now. Just to give you a second, one person that's I think is a great value is Justin Herbert. Right now, he's going in the fourth round, whereas I think there's a good chance that he joins Allen Hurts, Mahomes, who are going in the second, and then Geno Smith, who's way down at ADP of 113. And
Yeah,
if you can get him, and he's even 80% of what he was last year, you're getting a stable quarterback in the double-digit rounds, which is phenomenal.
yeah, I would
Um,
totally agree with the Geno Smith part. I don't think it's talked about enough about how he, like we valued him 14 and 16 and finished as QB6 last year, like you said. And the dude literally only got two better weapons to add to that offense and no competition brought in. And then the 3-year deal, which, it's kind of like, why don't you have him in the top 10? I don't know. Like you said, it's just tough to rank him there after only seeing it for 1 year. Right now in ADP, I like, and I am a little bit, I know we both actually bought in more on him, is Russell Wilson,
yeah.
QB 18, 134. Russ, like I kind of touched on it with the Sean Payton thing. Sean Payton has delivered. The last 4 QBs he's had have been Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, uh, Jameis Winston, and last year of Drew Brees. All those guys finished with over 17.5 points per game, which finishes right around the QB 10, QB 11 range. Russell
Mm.
Wilson, we saw every single year besides last year finish as a QB 1. He's never had a QB 1 season besides last year. Now we got fully healthy wide receiving core right now to start the year, and probably one of the deeper wide receiving cores in Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Jerry Judy, Tim Patrick. Those are all 4 guys that he could kind of rely on if need be. Mims is the only real question on what he is, but second round draft capital there for that wide receiver. So I feel like Russell Wilson kind of is one of the guys that I'm targeting right now at current ADP at 134, and believing that he can finish above that QB 18 rank, where he even last year had a really down year and still finished at QB 17 or 16. So he
Yeah.
still finished above what his current ADP is right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to look down this list and finally see some good depth quarterback values again. I feel like last year it was like you could get to like the QB 8, and then the QB 9 through 12 were kind of like, all right, this is fine, and everything after that was just you didn't really want to touch it. So it's funny, we started this off kind of talking about these really defined lines for quarterback tiers, and then the lines where the waters are muddy. And it feels like there's a heavy line right after the first 3. Then there's a good group right after that, about 5 or 6 players. And then after that, we start getting muddy. So go big or go home kind of year, it seems like.
Yeah. But with that, we are wrapping up today's episode. Next week, we are doing wide receivers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wide receiver tiers.
Yep. So we'll kind of give you the top 36 in our opinion. So down to the wide receiver 3-year type range, and maybe some sprinklings of some honorable mentions, because wide receiver tiers are a little tougher to break down. You're gonna have a lot there that all the way to wide receiver 50 that you think guys can land in. So
Yeah, a lot of guys with upside that are being drafted lower, but as the league has changed, there's more and more valuable wide receivers out there. But that being said, thanks everybody for tuning in tonight, and we look forward to having you next time. Take care.